Good morning, everyone. I'm Lynn Crocker, TIFF's Industry Programming Manager. Welcome to Day 7, the closing day of the Industry Conference, and our first session of the day, our masterclass with Rob Reiner. It has been such a pleasure to engage with you all week at the conference, so we'd like to thank you so much for coming out and supporting TIFF and TIFF Industry. I'd like to give a thank you to the festival's lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oreal Paris, and Visa, and our major industry supporters, OMDC and Telefilm Canada. And a big thank you to the Directors Guild of Canada for co-presenting this masterclass with us today. I'd like to remind you that there is no photography or video recording permitted inside the studio. We're taking care of all of that for you, though, and we are live streaming this talk and all of the talks that have happened here this week to our TIFF Live YouTube page. So we are here to speak with a true master of his craft. Rob Reiner is one of the most prolific and iconic writer, director, producer, actors working in American cinema and television for over 5 decades. His latest film, LBJ, is premiering at TIFF tonight at Roy Thompson Hall. Our conference programmer, Karina Rotenstein, will be hosting this morning's class, so I'd like to invite Karina to the stage, and please join me in welcoming Rob Reiner.
Okay, let's see who's out there.
Everyone.
All right, we got a few people, a handful there.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see everyone. So, when we found out that LBJ was screening here at TIFF, we just said, okay, we need Rob Reiner to do this masterclass because he's been in the business for 50 years. The creative output.
That's really disturbing.
But the creative output that he has contributed is just incredible, in terms of film, television, production, on the advocacy front. He's been a busy man for 50 years.
Yes, I'm very tired. I'm very tired. I'm going to clean up. I'm going to make this place way better right now. See, you don't need this here, right? You don't need that. Yeah, we put it right there. Okay. I'm also a neatener.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Don't come to my house. All right. Well, so we're all familiar with Rob's work. I will say it was really twisting my rubber arm having to revisit all of your fantastic work. It's just been a real inspiration and pleasure just to revisit everything. And just so we go through the roster just a little bit, just for everyone in the room.
Look at that cute notebook you have. Look, there was somebody interviewed me once. Remember those notebooks, those composition books that have those black and white little squiggly things? You should get one of those. That's it.
Yeah.
They're
The
good.
teal's not working?
Yeah,
no?
get a little squiggly thing.
Okay.
All right. What's the first thing on there?
I have, as a TV writer.
TV writer.
TV
Yes,
writer.
I did do that.
Smothers Brothers.
The Smothers Brothers. Yes, I was 21 years old. I actually was in a company called The Committee, which was an improv company that actually was an offshoot of Second City. Second City started in Chicago, and then you have a great Second City here in Toronto. And they started a company that came from Chicago, and they started in San Francisco. They moved to LA, and I was in that company. And Tommy Smothers, who was one of the Smothers Brothers, they came and looked at our show, and they hired me and a guy named Carl Gottlieb, who went on to write Jaws and was one of the writers on The Jerk. And they hired us from the company to go write for the Smothers Brothers. It was actually the first show was. It was a summer replacement show with Glenn Campbell. It was called the Summer Brothers Smothers Show. It was the first show that Glenn and Tommy produced it, and we wrote on it. And Steve Martin and I were thrown together because we were the two youngest guys. I was 21, he was 23, and they kind of threw us together. So we wrote on that show, and then we wrote for the Smothers Brothers after that. And they used to, we had the distinction. We wrote. Here's 2 of the jokes that I'm very proud of. We wrote one joke. One I'm going to go for very low level, And then the other one I'll go for more highbrow. The low-level one was we wrote the first fart joke that was ever done on network television. That deserves applause. I mean, we broke the fart barrier. What happened was we had an actor there, Pat Paulson, who was a comedian who ran for president actually one time. We did a fake campaign with him, but he was the president of the Acme Novelty Company, and he came out and he demonstrated all of these gag things. The finger gets stuck in the thing. You got the dribble glass, the pucker gum, the gum that snaps on your finger. And at one point during the demonstration, he sits down. You hear a like this. And he goes, oh, gee, somebody slipped a whoopee cushion in while I wasn't looking. And he stood up, there was no whoopee cushion there. So but I was 21, so you got a grade on the curve. But the good joke was, Tommy and Dick used to do a routine. They were like folk singers, and Tommy played the guitar, Dick was the bass player, and they did folk songs. And one of the folk songs they did, my old man's a sailor, what do you think about that? He wears a sailor's collar, he wears a sailor's hat, he wears a sailor's raincoat, he wears a sailor's shoes, and every Sunday morning he reads the sailor's news, and someday, if I can, I'm gonna be a sailor, same as my old man. And then the other guy would go, my old man's a cotton-picking, finger-licking, chicken-plucker, what do you think about that? And they did, they would go back and forth. And at one point, and if you know the Smothers Brothers, you'll get this joke. If you don't, it won't mean anything to you. But at one point, Tommy says, my old man's a Negro, what do you think about that? And Dick says, stop, what are you saying? He says, well, what do you mean, my old man? No, Dick, we're brothers. You can't, how could, he says, your old man can't be a Negro, my old man's not a Negro. And then Tommy says, no wonder Mom always liked you best. Now, if you know the Smothers Brothers, that got the biggest laugh of any laugh they ever had, because they used to do a routine, Mom always liked you best. The two brothers always had that. That was their go-to line. So when we did that line, it was like off the charts. They went crazy. This was in the 60s, when we had a lot of racial attention, unlike now, when there's none. Yeah. But anyway, that was one of the jokes I was proudest of.
And we can see why, totally.
Yeah. So that's Mother's Brothers. Say we did a long time on that first item.
Yeah, see? It's your fault. You made so many things.
I know.
It's your fault. I'm just
Master class.
Okay, so let's get to All in the Family.
Okay.
What I would like to know is, so first of all, Norman Lear was the one who pointed out to your father that you were funny.
That's right. I was, 7 or 8 years old, and I was playing jacks with his daughter, Ellen, and I don't remember it really, but obviously I was explaining the intricacies and the rules of how do you play jacks. It's a game you throw a ball up and you grab the things and you catch the ball. There's no games like that now. It's, all video, but that's what we used to do. And I was explaining the game and trying to give her the rules, and Norman thought it was hysterically funny. So he said to my dad, he said, your son is really funny. And my dad said, that kid, he sits in a corner and he broods all the time. He doesn't open his mouth. And so Norman actually, I think, was the first person to recognize some ability. Or as Otto Preminger once said to me, you are not without talent. I wrote for him on a movie once, and that's what he told me. Yeah.
So you were plucked out of your living room into now Archie Bunker's living room.
Yeah.
And so how did you know, because that was not an easy show to get off the ground. There was a lot of resistance.
Yeah, well, first of all, they did 2 pilots for ABC with two different sets of Mike and Gloria's. Sally Struthers and I were the 3rd set of Mike and Gloria's, and that was on CBS because ABC didn't pick the show up. It went to CBS, and we were the 3rd set. And CBS put a big disclaimer on the first time we came on the air. And essentially, they were saying, these are views of not represented. Basically, the disclaimer was, don't watch this show. Because we don't know how it got on, but just look the other way, you know? And you know, so it came on with this, and it wasn't successful right away. It took a while for it to gain traction. I mean, we showed 13 episodes, and then they reran those 13 right in a row. So we were on 26 weeks in a row. By the second 13, people started catching on to the show.
So audience aside, what were some of the indicators that you knew, even though you guys were battling so much, what were some of the indicators that you knew that you were still doing the right thing, that you were on the right path?
Well, one of them was, you know, well, first, you know, when it first came on, a guy came up to me and said, you know, that is the best show that's ever been on television, All in the Family. He said that and the Beverly Hillbillies are the two best shows. So that was the first indicator that we kind of, you know, hit the crease, you know. But no, it was the first backlash we had. I mean, the conversations that were happening around the country. Now you have to understand that America at that time was a country of a little less than 200 million people. And there was no DVR, I mean, there was no TiVo, no, you couldn't, if you wanted to watch the show, you had to watch it when it was on. That was it. You couldn't watch it any other time. So we would get 40 million people every week watching, having a shared experience. And we were talking about race, we were talking about the Vietnam War, we were talking about the women's movement, we're talking about sexuality. All of these areas that had never been talked about on television are being shared by 40 million people. And that became that water cooler discussion, you know, after that. And if you put it in perspective, now America is a country of 315 million people. And if you have a hit show, you're getting 10 million people. Or 15 is like off the charts, and nobody's watching it at the same time because they're all putting it on DVR. So that's the difference. The impact of something was enormous at that time, and it was like, I mean, it was like the Beatles. I mean, it was crazy. We'd go into, you know, an airport, you know, Gene and I or Sally, whatever. People would stand up and start cheering. I mean, it was pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy. But we knew we were doing something special and something good. And at first, I thought nobody would like it. You know, I thought, well, we're doing something special. It didn't push the envelope. It destroyed the whole envelope. I mean, there was no envelope. I mean, it was out there. And so we thought, you know, it'll be on, it'll be off. It's like, you know, when a comedian does a joke for the band, you know, it's not meant for public consumption, but he gets a big laugh, the band laughs at it. It's usually some kind of weed-related joke or whatever. There you get it. So we thought we were doing a show for the band, you know? We didn't realize that it was going to be picked up the way it was. And
were you honing you were continuing your writing craft in that show too?
Yeah, no, I wrote a number of episodes for the show, and what I found was, it was, talk about a masterclass, that to me was my masterclass. I went, and I sat in the writer's room. I sat up in the booth with the director when they were staging the cameras. So it, to me, was my learning experience. And it was a great experience for me because we did it in front of a live audience. We did over 200 shows in front of a live audience. So you got the sense of how a timing of a joke worked and how people were reacting to things. So it was a great experience for me.
And was there any opportunity to improv, or was everything tightly scripted?
No, we improvised, not once we got in front of the cameras, but we had a week-long rehearsal, and a lot of improvisation happened during the rehearsal period. And one of the scenes that a lot of people come up to me, and I've gotten more comment about this scene for some reason than any other scene, was we did a scene where I'm putting my socks and shoes on, and Carol O'Connor walks in and goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean? I'm putting my socks." He says, "You don't do it that way. You're putting on a sock and a shoe and a sock and a shoe. It's got to be a sock and a sock and a shoe and a shoe." And we got into this discussion. This happened in rehearsal because he happened to walk in and saw me do that. And we started riffing on it, you know, and that went into the show. We just put it, and that happened all the time. And one story I can remember was we would do a show at 5:30 for an audience. Then we take a break, and then we do, you know, have dinner, and then we do a second show, the same show, for an 8 o'clock audience. We'd have 2 different audiences. That way we could cut the best of the both shows for what went on the air. And I remember one time the first act of the show, it just died. I mean, it was a death. I mean, nothing. We got no laughs. And so between the 5:30 show and the 8 o'clock show, we went backstage and we started improvising and started just coming up with, and we improvised an entire first act of a show. And then we went out and performed it at 8 o'clock, and it worked. And that was after maybe 6, 7 years of doing the show. So everybody was comfortable with their characters. Everybody knew how to, but it only works if you have people who are comfortable improvising. It doesn't work if people are not comfortable. And that was my background, so, you know, it was easier for me. And that's why the first movie, Spinal Tap, people would say to me, why, you know, weren't you nervous? You did a movie. There was no script. There was no script for the movie. We had no script. We just had the basic, we had a 4-page outline about a tour and, you know, what places, and that there was a fight between the 2 lead guys and the woman that came between. It was like a Yoko Ono thing. But that was it. There was nothing there. I mean, we just started, you know, improvising. We did the whole thing, improvising. Things. Aren't you scared to do a movie, your first feature film? I said, no. That to me felt comfortable. I like doing that. And when you have Chris Guest and Harry Shearer and Michael McKean, these are improvisational actors. They're great at it. So when you do it, it was more difficult for me, honestly, to do the second movie, which was The Sure Thing, where you had to figure out where every camera goes and all of that, and staging it and all that. That was harder for me.
So going back to Spinal Tap for a second, so you put it out, and people thought it was real.
Yes.
This is still unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
Mime waiters.
Yeah.
Who thinks this is
okay?
like...
Well, when it first came out, the first preview we had was in Dallas, and we showed the thing, and it was like it died. I mean, it was like a death, you know. And people would come up to me and say, "I don't understand. Why would you make a movie about a band that nobody's ever heard of, and one that's so bad? Why don't you make a movie about the Rolling Stones or the Beatles or something? I mean, why did you do?" And I said, "Oh, it's satire. I said, "You ever see Saturday Night Live? They make fun of things." I said that people didn't get it right away. And interestingly enough, when we shot the movie, the DP, the director of photography, is a guy named Peter Smokler, and we hired him because he had shot a lot of real rock and roll documentaries. He had been a cameraman on a lot of, he was actually at the very famous Stones concert in Altamont where somebody got killed by a Hell's Angel. And he was at that concert. And so we hired him because he knew how to shoot, you know, concert footage and backstage footage, do all this. And the whole time we're shooting it, he kept saying, "What's funny about this?" He said, "This isn't funny." He says, "This is what they do." I said, "Yeah, but it's a little bit different. It's a little, you twist it a little bit, and yeah." But it took a while. People came. This is something else I learned about satire. Albert Brooks was my best friend in high school, and when we got out of college, we rented a house together. We had it was an upstairs and a downstairs, had 2 entrances. We had 2 different phones, but we had this house together. And Albert had this ability to make up stuff, and then he'd go on national television. He'd never go to a club and try it out. He'd just make it up, and then he'd go on. So he had this idea. He was going to play a mime. He was in whiteface. He was in a black leotard, and he never stopped talking the entire time. He never stopped talking. He kept saying, he said, "You see, I'm pulling the rope, but there is no rope here. It's a pretend rope. I don't have the rope." And he did it. So he goes on the Carson show, and my father at that day he had seen the routine, but my father was subbing for Carson. I went down there, and he did the routine, and he didn't get one laugh. I mean, not one laugh. It just died a death. Now, 3 weeks later, or 2-3 weeks later, they asked him, did he want to come back on the show? And so I said, "Albert," I said, "what are you going to do?" He says, "I'm going to do the mime routine." I said, "Albert, how can you do the mime routine? It died, you know?" And he said, "No, but it's funny." I said, I know it's funny, but nobody laughed. That's a part of being funny. You got to get people to laugh." He says, I'm doing it. It's funny." I said, "All right." He goes on. Now, Carson was hosting that night, And he goes on, he starts the routine, same thing. And it's dying, same thing, it's dying. But Carson, who had not seen the routine, gets it, and he starts to laugh. And he laughs, and he got hysterical. I was there. He literally fell off his chair. He was laughing so hard. And the audience saw that and realized, oh, this isn't really a mime. This is a guy making fun of a mime. The audience went. They went big. So it gave me a lesson that sometimes satire, you know, there's a very famous expression, satire closes Saturday night, you know. People don't get it right away, but once they get what you're doing, then it catches on. But you got to wait a long time. So.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
And so then we move into, I mean, you did The Sure Thing, which is, I guess, would you call it maybe a sort of precursor into somewhat of a Harry Met Sally kind of territory that you were going into?
I mean, if you look at I've done a number of romantic comedies, A Sure Thing, When Harry Met Sally, even The American President has a romantic comedy element to it, and some of the others. It's all the same story. I tell exactly the same story. It never changes. And it's my belief about men and women, which is women are more mature, they are more emotionally developed than men. You know, they always say, you know, the girls are more advanced at, you know, a certain age. No, they're more advanced at every age. Every age. They're always, no, I mean, it's true. It's true. It's true, and there's a reason for it. They value life more than men do. And the reason they value life more than men do is because they have life actually growing inside them. And that is a very basic anthropological thing that men can never feel as connected to life as women do. And that's my belief, and that's what I believe. So I always have the woman being more advanced and knowing more about what she wants than the guy. And the guy is always having to try to play catch up. And he eventually is able to see the value of what the woman is able to offer so that he can catch up to her. And so I tell that story every time. In The Sure Thing, it's a guy who thinks it's better to have sex with, you know, just a sure thing, that there's no connection. And he realizes over the course of the film that it's more important to have that connection. Same thing with Harry Met Sally. He's somebody who's ready to say, you know, any woman, a guy will go with any woman until you meet the person and he sees the person right there in front of him, but he can't see it until he's able to see it. And so that story I tell over and over in some version of it, because I believe that is the basic difference than the dance that happens between men and women.
And have you found that audiences outside of the United States have also related to that, especially when Harry Met Sally in some of your films? A lot of them are very American, but what are some of the responses abroad to your films?
Well, that film did very well all over the world. You know, I mean, they actually did a play version of the film, and they did it in France. So, I mean, obviously it resonates in some way, you know. Guys have a very narrow view of the sex act until they are with somebody they care about. Then they kind of start to understand the importance of what that is and what all is involved. And so, you know, I think it resonates with a lot of people. And I've always said, you know, men and women, sure, they can be friends. They can be best friends if they're involved. But I don't believe, let's say you have a man and a woman who are really, you know, they love each other and they're best friends. If that man is then becoming good friends with another woman, that woman's not going to like that. And vice versa, if that woman becomes best friend. I don't mean good friends. I don't mean like an acquaintance, like somebody you can chat with or whatever. I'm talking about a friend who you can share intimate, you know, things about your life. It's going to be threatening. It's always going to be threatening. So you can't, if you're going to be friends with, you know, somebody of the opposite sex, either the sex is always there. It's undercurrent. It's always at play. And it's either acted on or it's not acted on. If it's acted on, then you become close and tight. If it's not acted on, you eventually move away to somebody you can be close friends with who's of the opposite sex. And the same thing in homosexual relationships. They're threatening. Once that bond is made, that other friendship is threatened, I think. And it doesn't, women are not threatened by, you know, you have a male friend, you know, you have a close male friend, but they're not, and men are not threatened by a close female friend. It's just my feeling about it. And I mean, you know, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. Yeah.
And so through all of your films, just to segue a bit, through all of your films, you've introduced some amazing actors to us. And I mean, watching The Sure Thing again, I saw Daphne Zuniga, and I was like, oh. And then she ended up in Spaceballs. Like, I just, you know, it was something pretty interesting. I never thought she was quite comedic until, who knew?
Well,
I mean,
she's funny. She was funny.
And then John Cusack, of course, comes back into Stand By Me in a very incredible part. Small, but very poignant. I just like to roll the clip from Stand By Me. This clip is something, well, we'll run the clip and then we'll talk about it. Okay, run the clip.
We have clips. So that's an interesting scene, because that scene was written the night before we shot it. We didn't have anything. Andy Scheinman and I, who's my writing partner and producer on the movie, we said, we got to do something in the campfire. We have this sitting around a campfire, and we want to hear, you know, what do these kids think about? What do they talk about? And so we sat down and we started thinking about what we thought about, because we were both, you know, I was 12 years old in 1959. He was 11. And so we had the same references. And we started, you know, just spritzing and trying to think. And all of those things came out of that. And here's a weird one. Will Wheaton, who was 12, was sitting with his mother. And we were at this, you know, the hotel restaurant in Eugene, Oregon. And she's sitting with Will. And Will brings up, the mother brings up the thing about Wagon Train. So the only piece in there, we said, ooh, Wagon Train, they never get anywhere, they just keep Wagon Train. That came out of the line that she came up with, and all the rest of them were, because we used to think all the time, what the hell is Goofy, you know? He's got the hat and thing, but he looks like Pluto, he's a dog, but what is he, you know? And one talks and one doesn't, and you know, so we used to have this conversation. If you remember, at one point in the movie, they talk about Annette. They loved Annette Funicello, who was in the Mouseketeers, because she was developing a lot earlier than a lot of the Mouseketeers were, and she had the name Annette was, and the A and the E were bending around the sides, and we thought, wow, this is like, because when you're a kid, you're going, oh my God, this is like, you know, so that was your first big crush was Annette Funicello. So those are the things we thought about, and we just try to put them in the script.
There's such an authentic youth voice in this film, and I love the train scene, I love all the cinematic elements of it, but the quieter moments are the things that are really what make this film shine. Do you think Stand By Me could be made today?
Yeah, why not? I mean, you know, it's a rites of passage story. I mean, it would be different. It wouldn't be quite as innocent, because the exposure that kids have now, I mean, on the internet with, you know, for us, it was like if you got your father's, you know, Playboy magazine, it was like, oh my God, you know, that was a thing. And now it's like, you know, Playboy's out of business, you know, that because it's not, you know, it's not racy enough. And now kids, even at earliest ages, I mean really early ages, before 10 years old, are seeing the most unbelievable things on the internet. So it would be a lot less innocent, I think, but you could still do a rites of passage movie. Sure, absolutely.
And in terms of, so another film that you did, Flipped, which I loved. I thought it was really beautiful. That film was set in the 2000s, and you set it back in the 60s. And what was the decision for that?
Well, again, for me, it was try to hook into a personal thing. I mean, if you look at, you know, to me, I look at Stand By Me and Flipped as two pieces of the same thing. One is about, you know, starting to like yourself at coming of age when you're 12, and also the first time you fall in love when you're 12, 13, you know, with the first girl. So I could relate to what I was feeling at that time, and I could connect to it better with my experience. So that's why I said it, you know, again in 1959, because it was what I experienced and the first time I started having feelings for girls. And so that's why Flip, you know, what it is. So I look at those two pieces together, and the thing that, I mean, I love that movie Flipped. I really love it, and you know, it didn't get a lot of attention, and it's one that
Netflix here, by the
no,
way,
I mean, you could watch it. I mean, it's a pretty cool movie, and the reason I did it is my son, who was 11 at the time, was reading this book in school, and I read it to him. We were reading it, and I went, wow, what a smart, observed book this is about what boys and girls are feeling at that time, really feeling about the opposite sex, and it's told from 2 points of view, back and forth, the same experience, how the girl feels about it, how the guy feels about it. I thought, wow, what a great thing to do.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you work with actors, not just actors.
I yell at them. No, every actor is different.
Okay.
Every actor is different. It's like some actors need to be kicked. They like to be pushed. Some actors like to be left alone. The perfect example of two actors who work in very different ways in Misery, Kathy Bates and Jimmy Caan. Jimmy Caan doesn't like any rehearsal. He just is very instinctive, doesn't want rehearsal, doesn't want to think about what he's doing. Kathy Bates is a stage-trained actress. She loves rehearsal. Now, you want to arrive at the same place, which is with lots of rehearsal, you may want to make it look like it's being said for the first time. But that's Kathy's process. She likes to go through that over and over and over again. So we had to figure out a way to rehearse more than Jimmy wanted and less than Kathy wanted so that we could find the right balance. But it worked out. It worked out.
And tell us about your casting directors. You've had the same casting directors for all of your films, and Jane
Jenkins and Janet Hershenson.
Yes.
Janet has retired. Jane is still, kind of have a little hand in it. She's kind of semi-retired. And I met her, she didn't do Spinal Tap, but she was, I think, on The Sure Thing. I believe she was on The Sure Thing. And I met her, she had done Coppola's films, she had done some of Ronnie Howard's films, and I just met her and I just liked, we got along really well at first, and she brought in some great actors. She brought in John Cusack, she brought in people that I had not known about, and so we hit it off, and we just, and then you have a shorthand. It's like anybody. You find people when you make a film. There are certain people, the editor is a key person, and I've made a lot of films with Bob Layton, and then now that I'm making independent films, and they're not, I can't afford Bob Layton, basically. But I've got another Bob named Bob Joyce, and Bob Joyce, I'm so lucky to have, and then this is my now third film that I'm going to do with Bob Joyce, and what a thrill to have somebody that I can, communicate with, who's great at what he does, and we both work in similar ways. Similarly, the director of photography in the last 3 films, I've never had this. I've had good experiences with directors of photography, but I've never had what I have with Barry Markowitz, who I've done in the last 3 films. And this is the best experience I've ever had because we get along great. He's a great cinematographer. He's a great look. He works fast. He's out of his mind like me. And we have fun on the set. We have fun. We yell at each other back and forth. So at this stage of my life where I'm 69 years old, and I met him, I guess when I was 67 or whatever, to meet somebody that you can connect with like that, what a thrill, because you never think at a certain point in life you're going to meet anybody that you're going to say, oh God, this is, what a great collaboration. So I lucked out, with Barry, so that happens. And I've, worked with John Seale, I've worked with Michael Chapman, with, Tom Del Ruth, with, Bob Ellsworth, a lot of, Haskell Wexler, a lot of good DPs, but I've never had the kind of situation I have with Barry, so.
That's great.
No, it's lucky. I'm lucky to have it.
Yeah.
And so you try to keep the same team together because I tell people, you watch a movie, that if you make a movie, it's for other people. The experience of making the movie is for you. And that's what you're having, which is, you're going to work every day, you're saying, oh, I get to see that person. Oh, I like that. But you're hanging out with people, and that's your life experience. And then the movie you make is for everybody else, because I watch a movie, if something that I made comes on, I watch for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. And to me, it's not like I want to, it's like, ooh, it's like home movies, Oh, remember the day that we did that, or that happened that day. So that to me is what it is. So if you can get a group of people that you enjoy working with, then that's it. That's it.
And it doesn't even matter what you make at that point, right? Because you have
It doesn't. And it's taken me a long time to understand. yes, you want to make a good movie. Yes, you want the public to like it and all of that. But as a filmmaker, you want to have, your life experience is the making of that thing, the process, the doing of it. And that's all you have. That's all you have. You don't have any control over what a critic is going to say or what an audience is going to like or not like. All you can do is what you are and having your experience. So that's what I tell people. Enjoy what it is you're doing. Find something you like to do, that you enjoy doing, that you're good at, and then just do it. And then whatever happens, it'll happen. Don't worry about the results, you know?
And in terms of the business side with Castle Rock Entertainment, how do you play in that arena as a business
Well,
person?
the interesting thing is I always had that side to me, you know, which is, and I found initially that there's an artistic side and there's a business side, and, you know, it's called show business, you know? There's a show and there's a business. And so most people who are actors, writers, directors, they are interested in the show and they don't want to know so much about the business because they think if they try to understand the business, somehow it's going to corrupt their artisticness, you know? And I always had the business side to me. And at first I thought, oh, I don't know if these two things can live together. But what I've discovered is they can and they do and they make it easier for you. Because the more you understand how things get made, how they get financed, how they, you know, how production gets put together in terms of your budget and schedules and all that stuff, the better you are to work within that and figure out how to make a good movie. And I like that. So I find ways that they can live in harmony. Did I stump you?
No.
I stumped her. Maybe somebody else has a question. I don't know. No, you can ask more. Go ahead. She got stumped.
No, it's all of this is really interesting to me. Because so you once said that you've never made a film that a studio wanted to make.
That's true.
And so give us a best example of a pitch that cut through that.
Well, nothing. No pitch that I ever made. Well, oh, here, look, for instance, you know, now I'm making independently financed movies. But, you know, at Castle Rock, we've made over 125 movies over the course of 30 years that we've been together. And not one of those movies would ever get made at a studio now. None of them. I mean, I look around my wall, I've personally made like 20 movies. Not one of them would get made. Think of this. You go to a studio and you say, I've got an idea for a film about two old guys dying of cancer who want to go on a trip because that's their last chance to... No, they're not going to make that movie. They're not going to make it. And the truth is they didn't. Even with Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman, nobody wanted to make that movie. And the only reason it got made is because Alan Horn happened to be at Warner Brothers, and he said, oh, and nobody there wanted to make it either, except Alan. And he said, okay, you can make the movie. Now, we're screening the movie for the first time for all the studio people. The studio people are sitting there, and Morgan Freeman had just done this voiceover. Remember this movie about in the cold about all the penguins and stuff?
March of the Penguins.
Huh? March of the Penguins, right? He had done the narration for it. And so the lights come down, and you hear Morgan Freeman's voice is the first thing you hear in the bucket list. And I swear to God, one of the executives says, too bad this movie doesn't have any penguins in it. I'm serious. I am dead serious. And I thought, ay, ay, ay. And, you know, they watch the movie, and they don't have any feeling about the movie one way or the other. They have to put it in front of an audience, get cards, and then the people tell them, this is a good movie, and then they like the movie. Then they like the movie. They're going to find out whether or not they like the movie. So that's what happens. And so there's no movie. I got a movie about 4 boys to a 12-year-old, and they go on a trip for 2 days, and they're going to go find a dead body. Who's making that movie? Nobody. I got a movie about a kid who's sick in bed and a grandfather who reads him a fairy tale, and you see the fairy tale.
And that took 16 years to make.
Okay, so Princess Bride is a perfect example. I had made Spinal Tap, and I had made The Sure Thing, and one of the executives at Paramount asked me to come and meet with her and says, you know, we want to be in business with you. We love what you've done. Now they've already seen these things, so they like it, you know, and they've seen them be sort of okay, and it's your Sure Thing, even though it didn't do huge, it did some business and made some money, and so they said, we want to be in business with you. And I said, okay, and she said, what do you want to do? What's a movie you want to do? And I said to her, I said, you don't want to do what I want to do. And she said, no, we want to do what you want to do. I said, no, you want me to do what you want to do. And she said, no, we want to do what you want to do. I said, okay, I want to make a movie about the Princess Bride. She said, not that. Not that. So that was the meeting. Those are the meetings I had. You know, there's nobody, you know, that will make the movies that I want to make.
So to young filmmakers, or not too young, to filmmakers in the room, like, what is the best advice you can tell them in terms of not taking no for an answer?
That's it. That's it. Not taking no for an answer, but also do something you really care about, because ultimately, I go back to the thing is, you're having your life experience. You can't project what somebody's going to like or not like. I mean, if you do, you know, you'd be, you know, the richest person in the world. Nobody knows anything. Nobody knows what's going to be successful or not. I mean, I said to Karen Murphy, who produced Spinal Tap, I mean, we couldn't get it anybody. We got a development deal at a place called Marble Arch. It was owned by Lou Grade, and they gave us money, $60,000 to write a screenplay. We sat down to write the screenplay, and you know, I realized, the four of us realized, we can't write this. There's no way in screenplay form we can communicate what this thing is. So I said to the guy who ran the company, I said, give us the $60,000. We'll make a little bit of the movie for you, and you'll get a sense of what it is we're trying to do. So I put in $25,000 of my own money. Chris, Harry, and Michael put $5,000, so we had $90,000 altogether, and we made a bit. We made 20 minutes of a movie. We did some concert footage, some backstage footage, some interview footage. We cut it all together. I showed it to him, and he said, no, I don't want this. I don't want this. So now we're done. We have this 20-minute thing. We don't know. So we go to every studio. And I told Karen, because it was in a 16-millimeter film can, and I said to Karen, I said, Karen, if we ever get this movie made, we're going to have the story that said we went with a film can under our arm to every studio in the city, and we did, and we got turned down everywhere. Every single place we got turned down. Finally, is the craziest story. They're making a movie called Take This Job and Shove It. And this was a movie that was Robert Hayes, the guy who was the star of Airplane, was going to be in this movie. This was being made for Avco Embassy. They're looking for a director. A guy named Peter Turner, who was an agent. He's now passed away. He was not my agent. He was with the William Morris Agency. I wasn't with the William Morris Agency. But we had been showing this 20-minute thing around town. He happened to have seen it. He says to the executive at Avco Embassy, he says, why don't you hire Rob Reiner? And she says, Rob Reiner, what has he done? He hasn't directed anything. Because in those days, it wasn't, if you came out of television, you were not to be in film. You were a second-class citizen. And I had just been in All in the Family, and they didn't want me to be a movie director. So she said, well, what has he done? And he said, this 20-minute thing. She looks at the 20-minute thing as a way of thinking, maybe I'll direct this job, you know, take this job and shove it. She looks at it and she says, forget take this job and shove it. What about this thing? What are you doing with this? I said, I can't get it going. Nobody will finance it. She said, well, if you can get somebody to put up the money, I think I can convince the head of the studio, which was Frank Capra II, to distribute it. Well, and then she said she could get somebody to distribute it. Well, if you have a distributor, it's much easier to get financing. So I then got a guy, based on that, to put up some money for the movie. And so now I had a distributor. I had less than $2 million. It was very cheap. And then Avco Embassy is sold to, you know, it's sold to Jerry Perenchio and Norman Lear. And they scrap every single project, everyone, including this one. And I went, oh my God, you know? And Alan Horns tells me, we're not gonna make this movie. We've decided we're gonna wipe the slate clean. I said, Alan, please. I said, Norman, you know, he knows me from All in the Family. Let me go in. I've known him since a kid. Please let me talk to him. So I go into the meeting with Norman and Jerry Perenchio and Alan Horn. A couple of other people are there. And I go through this impassioned plea. Please, and why it's going to be, and it'll be greater than thing. And I'm just going crazy in this meeting. And I finish and I leave. And this is what I'm told. I wasn't there. I'm told that Norman turned to everybody in the place and said, who's going to tell him he can't make this movie? And that's how I got that movie made. But there's nobody that would make that movie except that I had a Medici. I had somebody to support me and let me do that. Now, if you're a young person, you can make a movie. You don't need millions of dollars. You don't even need $1 million. I mean, you know, there's a good friend of one of the producers on this movie. His name is Trevor White. Are you in here, Trevor? Are you here? Where are you? Huh? He's in the back. He just made a movie for $1 million or less than $1 million. And the point is, you know, if you have a good editing app, you know, on your computer, and you have a camera, you can make a movie. You know, you don't need millions of dollars. So do what you want to do. Do your, you know, do something that's close to your heart and something that you like doing.
So if you were making Spinal Tap today with digital technology, would you still be shooting?
Well, that's an interesting question because we did it on 16 millimeter because there was no digital in those days, and we were trying to satirize the documentary style rock and roll movies like Last Waltz and The Kids Are All Right and The Song Remains the Same, all these, and Don't Look Back, you know, that Bob Dylan. So that's why we did it that way. I think if we were going to do something now, we probably would do it digitally. Absolutely, because that's what everything's being made digitally.
And then when do you pull the plug? I mean, usually when you have film and you just run out of money, or like in that kind of scenario, I mean, in this kind of scenario, it's pretty freeform, no?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the beauty of digital is it's not as costly, you know, and you, like I say, you have an editing. I mean, we had to edit, you know, 16 millimeter film. I mean, you know, actually have to splice it and put it together. It takes a long time. It took us 9 months to basically edit the film. It only took us 25 days to shoot it. But then it's because it's a documentary and people know who made documentaries, you're writing with the pieces of film. You're putting it together in that way. But I'll tell you, the first time we screened it at the AFI, it was, you know, in LA, the film broke like 6 or 7 times because, you know, 16 millimeter, those splices are very, you know, tenuous, so they kept breaking. So, you know, but now it's a lot easier. And I embrace all the technology. I think it's good. I'm not one of those guys that says, well, I'm a film, it has to be film. You can make great looking films on digital, and I love, you know, the editing facilities, digital, you know, it's good. It's good. And I'm a guy who started on a moviola. My first thing I did was on an upright moviola, which people don't even know what the hell that is.
In terms of the state of comedy, where is the state of comedy right now?
It's right there. I don't know where it is. I don't know where it is.
Who are some of the people that you find are really pushing the envelope? Is there enough envelope pushing? Are people saying the right things
I think there are. I mean, you know, Louis C.K. is pushing the envelope. He's got, you know, he's figured out ways of reaching an audience, you know, directly through his website and stuff, and he's doing some great stuff. I mean, there's a lot of really good comedians, young comedians. I used to love Mitch Hedberg. I mean, he passed away, but this guy was a brilliant comedian. He was like Stephen Wright, except even edgier than Stephen Wright in a way. And so there's a lot of good comedians. I mean, Chris Rock. I mean, there's a lot of good people that are doing it, you know. And I find there's a lot of good stuff being done on television. A lot of good stuff on television. And I think it's because it's interesting when television first came out, in the late 40s, early 50s, it was a very sophisticated medium. So they always talked about that as being the golden age of television. The reason it was the golden age of television is because in order to own a television, you had to have a lot of money. So there was usually a more sophisticated crowd that had television. So the product they made would, you know, there would be the Playhouse 90, Lux Video Theater, Studio One, satires, show of shows, those kinds of things. And then all of a sudden it became mass media, and it was interesting because, you know, I've made this comment before, but my father was on television before we owned a television. So we got a television, we could see him, and the company that sponsored Sid Caesar and Show of Shows was the Admiral TV. And they started selling so many televisions. Because of that, they decided to not sponsor the show anymore and build more factories, to put their money into building factories. And it became a mass media, and then it became a dumbing down kind of thing where you wanted to reach broader audiences. Now, because everything's fragmented, and because of cable, and because of streaming, and Netflix, and Amazon, and all that, you see much more sophisticated stuff because you're reaching niche audiences very much like the way you did in the early 50s. So, I mean, in the late 40s and early 50s. So I think you're seeing, that's why they call it the second golden age, because you're reaching, creative people can do a lot more specific work, I think.
What are some of the shows that you've been really enjoying recently?
Oh, tons of them. I mean, you know, my wife Michelle is here. We binge watch everything. I mean, you know, from Transparent to Togetherness. I mean, you know, we love Rectify. That's an amazing show on the Sundance Channel. I mean, obviously Breaking Bad and you know, The Wire is great. If you haven't seen that, you catch up. That's the other thing. You can catch up with these things and see them, and you know, there's great stuff on television.
And House of Cards, I'm sure, is
House
right
of Cards.
up your alley.
I felt House of Cards, the first season, I thought was amazing because it was all about this Machiavellian thing of how people gain power and how they manipulate. And then it pushed the envelope in a bad way for me because it's gone a little too far, killing people, and I mean, you know, that kind of thing. But I still like it. We still watch it. And I love Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is coming back, which is a brilliant, you know, Larry David is as sick and brilliant as it gets. And, you know.
Seinfeld had a hard time getting made that first
Well,
time.
Seinfeld, they threw us off. Our company produced Seinfeld, and the first order we had was 4 episodes. And then they ordered 5 more episodes, and then another 4, and then finally they took it off. After 13 days, that's it. We're not doing this anymore. Because it was too, they couldn't understand it, and they didn't give us good time slots. Eventually they did, but then I went into Brandon Tartikoff, who ran NBC, and I said, please, this is the best thing you have. It's the most innovative, the most original thing you have. He said, yeah, but Rob, I can't put a show on where people sit around waiting for a table at a Chinese restaurant, and that's all they do. He said, you gotta have stories. I said, there'll be stories. I promise there'll be stories. And he said, well, but Larry David, he's crazy. He won't do stories. I said, he'll do it. So now I go back and I talk to Larry. I said, please, just let us. He agrees to let us stay on. And I go back to Larry and I said, Larry, we got to have stories. We can't just be a show about, it was originally called a show about nothing. I said, we can't be that. We have to create stories. And he says, you're going to make this into the Lucy Show. You want to make this into the Lucy Show? I said, no. It'll never be the Lucy Show. It'll always be your version. It'll be your sensibility. And eventually, Larry came to love and embrace the idea of story. He always, if you look at Larry's stuff, I love his formula. He gets 2 or 3 things working, and then he finds ways of tying them all together, you know, and it's like the most complicated storytelling, and it's great, you know, and he's done great.
And clearly you're such a great negotiator. You know how to play that field pretty well.
Yeah, well, I got angry in that meeting, so I think I bullied him a little bit. I don't know what I did, but he always talked about how, you know, I was so forceful with him. Maybe that's how I got Spinal Tap made. I don't know.
Probably.
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, let's talk about LBJ.
Okay.
This is why you're here.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. World premiere tonight at Roy Thompson Hall. Yeah. So make sure you see it. Woody Harrelson is unbelievable in this film.
He's amazing. You know, I've worked with a lot of good actors over the years, you know, but this is off the charts what he does in the film. And if you go see it tonight, you'll see something extraordinary because you know, when people heard that Woody Harrelson was going to play this part, they said, Woody, I don't know. All I can tell you is just see this film. You won't believe what he does. It's It's an extraordinary performance, and we tried to make a film. I mean, there was another film that was made for HBO that Bryan Cranston did, and he did a great job too. And that focuses on a different aspect of LBJ. This one focuses on just the period from which the president lands in Dallas to LBJ addressing a joint session of Congress and giving the very famous civil rights speech, which is almost takes place in less than a 2-week period. It's very collapsed. I mean, there is a flashback to when he was a majority leader. We see that, but basically, it's a very contained time frame. And what we wanted to do was to show LBJ as the complex person that he was. Growing up in the 60s, I hated LBJ. I mean, I was of draft age during that period, during the Vietnam War. So all I could think of was, this is a guy that could send me to my death. And I was against the war, and I hated him, and that's all I saw. As I've gotten older, and I've been involved in government, I've been involved in politics, I see how public policy works and how politics works with government, and I have a different view of what he was able to accomplish. That he was the most effective legislator maybe in the history of the country. And had it not been for the Vietnam War, he probably would have gone down as one of the great presidents of all time. Now, having said that, there was Vietnam, and he has to live with that as well. So it is a very complex character, and what I wanted to see is not just the forcefulness he had and the strength of his ability to persuade people, which he did, in passing legislation, but also this incredible insecurity that he had, this just fear, paralytic fear that he would feel paralyzed by moving forward because he was afraid people didn't love him, and that he looked at Kennedy as, they love Kennedy, they don't love me. And I read a number of the Caro books, who's the expert on LBJ, and we got a lot from that. But the main book that I was able to get the personal stuff from LBJ was a book by Doris Kearns Goodwin, and in that she mentioned 2 things that struck me. One was that LBJ, and she worked for LBJ. She was in the LBJ White House, and she went down to Texas and sat with him and wrote this biography of him. And the 2 things that got me, one was that he had this recurring dream where he would feel paralyzed. He would be paralyzed in a wheelchair and couldn't move. And I thought, that's interesting. And he had this dream over and over. And the other one was his revelation that his mother would withhold her love from him at times. Loved him some of the time when he was doing the things that she wanted him to do, but then withheld the love and was very cold to him at times. And so these things, I think, informed the kind of person he was. And so we wanted to try to give a full picture of who this guy was at the most vulnerable time of his life, where he had to take up the mantle of being the president of the United States after somebody who was loved and was, enamored. The public enamored this guy, and he had to step into his shoes. And the one thing he knew is how to get stuff done, but he was frightened that he wouldn't be able to get stuff done because they didn't love him and they didn't want him, and he got there illegitimately. So that's what we try to explore with the film, and if you go see it, you'll see Woody Harrelson just, I mean, it's off the charts. I mean, it's amazing, the performance he gives.
Absolutely. We are running out of time, so we've got to go to the audience. Let's go to the audience.
Okay. Who's out there? Oh, there's people.
Right over here, yes?
Hello, Mr. Reiner.
Yeah, where are you?
Hi, over here.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Hello, Mr. Reiner. I was wondering for finding new faces, because of course you found so many in your career. What does an actor have to do to sort of get your notice?
Well, I think the main thing is you're coming in to audition for a part. The thing is to not try to do anything to get noticed. And that is, for me anyway, I look at somebody who can just inhabit the part and not push anything and be real. I don't want somebody who's going to do handsprings in front of me, because then I know that that person is trying too hard. Woody Harrelson once said to me, when he got the part in Cheers, he really didn't, he wasn't in a good mood. He didn't really feel like he wanted to be there. He didn't, oh, I don't know what he walked in and just kind of didn't feel the pressure of it, just said, what the heck, and he gave a great reading because he didn't have that thing of, I gotta get this part, I gotta do this. And I think that's the thing. You wanna just inhabit the character. I mean, for me, it's not everybody, because this is just the way I work. If somebody comes in and there's a part and I think the guy's right for that part, they could read one word, one line. I go, okay, that's fine. And they go, what do you mean? I said, no, you can do it. I can see you can do it. Because they're not trying to do anything more than just do what's there in the part. Kathy Bates, this is a true story. Kathy Bates, who I had seen on stage, so I know she could act, you know, she's a great actress. She came in, because she had never done a film, you know, I mean, she had never starred in a film. She came in to read, you know, for Misery, and she started to read a scene, and she read one or two lines. I said, that's fine, it's fine. I can see you can do it. I mean, she said, what? I said, yeah, if you want to do it, you can do it. And she said, that means you're giving me the part? I said, yeah, you know, I can see it, you know. And she said, can I call my mother? And I said, yeah, you can call your mother. But so that to me is the thing. You know, just play for real, you know, just be real and play you know, play what's required in the scene.
Great question. Yes. Right here. Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Reiner. Joshua Young.
Yeah.
How do you, have you noticed through the years, has there been a change when it comes to communicating with your crew and communicating with your cast, like through the years from how you started to how you are now? Have you sort of altered that, changed that, or stuck to it?
Well, I think, yeah, that's an interesting question, but I think that when I started out, I didn't know so much, you know. I didn't really, you know, I was an actor, and I had directed some theater, but I was not comfortable with all the technical aspects of making a film. So it took me a while to figure that stuff out. So I wasn't as relaxed, I think, you know, in doing it. I once passed some legislation in California. It was tobacco legislation. It was a ballot initiative, and it raised money for children 0 to 5, you know, early childhood programs for young children, 0 to 5. And the Governor Davis at the time asked me if I would be the chairman of this state commission, and which was a big job because it was basically overseeing the implementation of you know, $750 million a year for all this statewide. And I'm the chairman of this thing. I'm up in Sacramento, and I'm, you know, and I said the first day, and I said, I am an actor. Today I'm going to act like a commissioner. And hopefully at some point I will be a commissioner. And I did, because I learned. I studied, I learned, you know, how public policy works, how programs work. I learned about how government works, and I took my time. So I did learn as I went along, and I learned from making mistakes and, you know, listening to certain people I shouldn't have listened to and then now I'm, you know, I still, you know, I don't know stuff. There's always new things I don't know, but I'm more humble about that now, and I don't feel uncomfortable saying, I don't know what that is. I don't know how that works, you know, or tell me or whatever. Because as a director, the main thing you have to have is an overall view of what this thing is going to be. The actors are all better actors than you are. The DP is a better cameraman than you are. The production designer is better at building and designing sets. The costume person is better at they're all better than you are. But you have to have a little bit of knowledge in every area so that you can look at the whole thing. None of them have the whole thing in mind. Nobody has the whole thing in mind. So that's the one thing you have to have. And so as long as you do, and as long as you're comfortable, and I've told this story, as long as you're comfortable with each person at some point in time thinking of you as an idiot, because you're going to do something that doesn't make sense to them, because because what you have to do as a director, you have to ask people to strive for perfection in their area. Go for perfection, but you have to feel comfortable to let them feel like even if it's not perfect, it's okay, because if anybody is perfect in their area, it's throwing something else out of whack, time-wise, or what kind of emphasis you're giving to something. So you get people to strive for perfection, feel comfortable, make a nice feeling on the set so that they can feel comfortable, and then strive to make and have the overall. So does that fit into what the film is? And by the way, sometimes, be open to anybody, because sometimes they'll come up with something that you didn't think of, a lot of times, many times, and you go, ooh, that does fit into this overall. But feel comfortable, say, oh, that's a good idea, but I don't know if that works here, in that way. So I think I'm more comfortable now than I was back then, but you still learn. You still learn.
Yes, back there. Yep, sir.
Hi, Mr. Reiner.
Hi.
Your bit about the experience of making a movie is really meaningful, and your views on relationships and young love. And I just wanted to share with you, I was on your movie Flipped as an extra, and I had a similar experience to the characters in the movie. I met a girl, another extra in the movie. We became great friends, and we've been dating for 5 years now.
All right. That's great.
I thought
That's great.
I wanted to know how you go about creating that like inspiring environment on the film set. It was really one of the most amazing experiences of my life.
Because it's what I was saying earlier. I want to have a good experience. I want it to be. I mean, I'm spending my life doing this. In pre-production is many weeks, shooting many weeks, post-production many weeks. 9 months out of a year. I mean, you're spending your time doing. This is what you're doing. So if you don't have a pleasant experience, then you didn't have an enjoyable life during that period. So I want people to have a good time and enjoy it. And it always bothers me if somebody's complaining or they don't like it, or whatever the things they're doing. It's like I feel bad, because I don't want them to have a bad time. I want them to have a good time, And that doesn't mean I don't get crazy. I get plenty crazy, Sometimes I get really frustrated. I'm a human being. I get frustrated and stuff. But I never yell at somebody. I don't yell at a person. They didn't do. I yell at the wind, because things are going wrong. There's always a time in a movie when you go into a vortex, and there's nothing you can do. Things are just going wrong, and the more you try to right it, the worse it gets. And when that happens, the best thing is, sit back, relax, and float down streams, because it's not dying. The only thing that's life and death is life and death. The rest of it it's a movie, You'll fix it. You'll figure out how to make it work. It's not the end of the world,
That's great. Yep, right over here. Right over here. Is there a mic? Yep. Yep, go ahead.
Hi there, Mr. Reiner. Thank you so much for your honesty. I think we really all appreciate that.
Oh, good.
One of the questions that I had for you was, as an actor-director, when you're on set, do you ever take a minute, with some big-name, directors, do you kind of watch what they do, pick up any tricks? Are you kind of like a little bit of a fly on the wall? Just kind of curious, what are the tricks that you may have picked up watching other directors?
Well, I don't, luckily for me, I've been in some other people's films, so I see how they work, and they all work differently, Everybody works differently. And so you kind of try to fit into what they want, because it's their movie. And I would never, as an actor, I would never say to a director, what are you doing, because, that would be the worst thing. I know as an actor, I want to be as little as trouble as possible. I'm there, I go where I'm kicked, whatever they want. And I remember one time I did this movie with Woody Allen. It was called Bullets Over Broadway. And we go to this set. The location was outside of in Minetta Lane. It was a cafe, and down in the Village, it was a night scene. And I'm sitting there, and Cusack was in there, and Alan Arkin, and we're sitting around this table. And I walk in to do this, and I'm looking, and it's Carlo De Palma, who's a great cinematographer, and I'm looking around, and I'm thinking, You know, unless there's a film stock I'm not aware of, this is not going to show up. I mean, it's too dark, you know. But I don't say anything because it's not me. It's not my place. And it's Carlo De Palma. It's Woody Allen. I'm not gonna. So we do the scene, finish it, and then that day, the next day, I get a call in the hotel room, and they say, we got to reshoot the scene. We watched the dailies. It was a radio show. It was basically, it was black. It was just black. So we go back down there the next night, and they got the ballpark lights, the Musco lights, and it's lit up, you know, like crazy. So that's what happens. But I pick, you know, you do pick up little things, you know. I watch the way Scorsese likes to work. I mean, he works slowly, but then once everything's ready, then he works fast, you know. And when he gets everything ready, it takes him a while, but then let's go. And he also listens to other people. He's totally open to listening to what other people, and he lets people improvise. So, you know, some people like you to say that line, say it that way. Other people let you be more free. So, you know, you look at other people and see how they do it. Uh-oh, they disappeared.
Yeah, it is the end.
They turned the lights off on you.
Well, we don't have our cane. We don't.
All right, one last question, and then we go. Yeah, one last question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Rob. I think thank you from millions of people for what you do. It's been huge in my life, and I'm sure I can speak for
And you're
everybody.
not from Australia.
I am from Australia.
I'm kidding. I heard the accent. That was a joke. Because you could have said, no, I'm from New Zealand or something.
Ouch, that hurt.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you about, I remember being 14, seeing A Few Good Men, and falling in love with film and filmmaking, and I remember thinking, you had all of those stars very much, they were all peaking at the same time with Demi Moore and Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson. How did you manage all of those personalities on, you know, with such an incredible script? But I would imagine the power on that set would have been incredible. What was the experience?
Well, that's a great question, and I gotta say that I get a big assist from Jack Nicholson on that, because we had a read-through of the film before we started shooting. And usually when you have a read-through and you have a cast all around, you know, people kind of, you know, mark time, they read it, they don't really invest a full performance because they're finding their way with the material. We had this read-through, and Jack Nicholson hit it out of the park. I mean, he gave a full-on performance at that read-through, and it sent a very loud message to all the young actors that we're here to do work. This is what we're here to do, and it made everybody step up in their game. And the way I likened it, people who like baseball, is you watch people get in the batting cage and they're taking their swings, and then all of a sudden Babe Ruth gets in the cage and starts hitting them into the upper deck. And I could see these young actors with their mouths open thinking, oh, I see what this is. We really got to get our act together. And everybody did. The other thing was Tom Cruise is the most professional actor I've ever worked with. I mean, I've never seen a guy more focused and more dedicated than he was. And so, you know, there's an old expression, a fish stinks from the head. So there was me, who was, you know, focused and dedicated, and then the two main leads were like that. So it made it pretty good, pretty good. And I find that people who have those big egos, you know, they're not real actors, because if you're an actor, I mean, you may have an ego about all kinds of things, but when you're doing your work, this is what you're doing. So you're gonna, you know, you want to get there and do your work. Yeah.
Well,
all right. That's it.
You're always welcome here, Rob. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.